The aisle of the Oak Creek supermarket was silent, save for the hum of the freezer units and the terrifying metallic click of a service weapon being unholstered. In one hand, Special Agent Kaden Voss held a carton of organic eggs. In the other, he held nothing but the open air, palms facing out, surrendering to a threat that shouldn't have existed. Across from him stood Officer Ronan Blaine, finger quivering on the trigger of his Glock 17, eyes wide with a mixture of adrenaline and deeply ingrained prejudice. "Get on the ground now," Blaine screamed, his voice cracking. He didn't know that the man he was about to execute was a decorated federal agent. He didn't know that this decision would ignite a national firestorm, destroy his life, and reveal a corruption so deep it would rot the department from the inside out. This is the story of how one ego-driven mistake led to immediate termination and the brutal karma that followed. The fluorescent lights of the supermarket on 4th Street hummed with a lethargic buzz, casting a sterile glow over the rows of cereal boxes and canned vegetables. It was the kind of mundane hour where the working class of Oak Creek were rushing to grab dinner ingredients before retreating to the comfort of their living rooms. Kaden Voss adjusted the collar of his gray hoodie. He was tired. It had been a grueling period involving a wiretap operation in Chicago, and he had only just driven back to the quiet suburbs of Oak Creek to decompress. He was one of the youngest senior special agents in the Bureau's history, a man who had dismantled human trafficking rings and seized cartel assets worth millions. But right now, in the pasta aisle, he wasn't Agent Voss. He was just a guy looking for marinara sauce who wanted to make spaghetti for his fiancée, Alara. He rubbed his eyes, his stubble scratching against his palm. He moved with the easy, athletic grace of someone who spent his mornings boxing, but his posture was slumped with exhaustion. He picked up a jar of Prego, checked the sodium content, doctor's orders, and placed it in his red plastic basket. 2 aisles over, Officer Ronan Blaine was bored. Blaine was a veteran of the Oak Creek Police Department, though veteran was a generous term for a man who spent most of his shifts issuing parking tickets and harassing teenagers at the skate park. He had a buzz cut that was growing out unevenly and a uniform that strained slightly around the midsection. Blaine didn't join the force to serve the community. He joined because he liked the way the badge made people look at him. He liked the fear. It compensated for a lifetime of being picked last in gym class and ignored by girls in high school. Tonight, Blaine was on a shoplifting suppression detail, a fancy term for wandering around the grocery store trying to look busy so he didn't have to answer radio calls for domestic disputes. He turned the corner of aisle 4, his hand resting habitually on his belt near his taser. That was when he saw Kaden. To a reasonable observer, Kaden was a tall black man in a hoodie and sweatpants buying pasta sauce. To Ronan Blaine, whose perception was warped by internet echo chambers and a profound lack of cultural exposure, Kaden was a suspect. Blaine narrowed his eyes. He watched as Kaden reached into his pocket to check his phone. Reaching for something, Blaine thought. Stashing something. The officer's heart rate kicked up. This was it. A bust. He'd catch a shoplifter, maybe someone with a warrant, and the sergeant would finally get off his back about his low arrest numbers. He didn't see a federal agent. He saw a stereotype. He saw a hoodie. He saw a threat. Kaden felt eyes on him. It was a sixth sense honed by years of undercover work. He didn't look up immediately, keeping his gaze on the pasta types. Angel hair or linguine? He sensed the presence moving closer, heavy boots clumping against the linoleum. "Excuse me," a voice barked. It wasn't a polite request. It was a command. Kaden turned slowly, the jar of sauce still in his hand. He saw the uniform first, Oak Creek PD. Then he saw the face, young, flushed, jaw set in a way that screamed insecurity masquerading as authority. "Can I help you, officer?" Kaden asked, his voice calm, deep and steady. "Put the jar down," Blaine said, stepping into Kaden's personal space. He stood about inches shorter than Kaden, which only seemed to irritate him more. Kaden frowned slightly but complied, setting the jar back on the shelf. "Is there a problem?" "You tell me." Blaine sneered, his hand hovering over his radio. "We've had reports of theft in the area. You fit the description." Kaden almost laughed. It was the oldest line in the book. The description? A guy buying pasta on a Tuesday? "Don't get smart with me." Blaine snapped, his volume rising. A woman at the end of the aisle looked over, clutching her purse tighter, then hurriedly pushed her cart away. "Empty your pockets." Kaden sighed, his exhaustion returning tenfold. He knew his rights. He also knew the reality of the situation. As a black man in America, even with a badge in his pocket, de-escalation was his burden to carry, not the officer's. "Officer?" Kaden said, keeping his hands visible. "I'm going to reach into my back pocket. I have my wallet there. My ID is inside." I said, "Empty your pockets. Turn around." Blaine shouted. The logic, or lack thereof, was already spiraling. He was losing control of the interaction because Kaden wasn't cowering. Kaden's calmness felt like disrespect to Blaine. "Officer, look, I'm on the job," Kaden said, lowering his voice to avoid making a scene. "I'm federal, FBI. My credentials are in my back pocket. If you let me show you—" "Liar!" Blaine yelled. The curse word echoed through the store. "You're lying! Turn around and put your hands on your head or I will light you up." The aisle was no longer empty. A stock boy froze near the dairy section. A mother covered her child's ears near the bread. Kaden's eyes hardened. The brotherhood of law enforcement usually extended a professional courtesy, but Blaine was too far gone, blinded by a narrative playing out in his own head. "I am not turning around," Kaden said firmly. "I am identifying myself as a federal agent. You are making a mistake. You need to call your supervisor." "I am the authority here." Blaine screamed. He panicked. The calmness of the suspect was terrifying him. Why wasn't he running? Why wasn't he scared? He must have a weapon. Blaine drew his gun. The sight of the firearm changed the atmosphere instantly. The air grew thin. The hum of the freezer seemed to stop. "Gun!" someone screamed from the checkout lanes. Kaden didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. If he moved too fast, Blaine would shoot. If he reached for his badge, Blaine would shoot. If he dropped to his knees too quickly, Blaine might startle and shoot. "Officer," Kaden said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming the voice of a negotiator. "My name is Special Agent Kaden Voss. My badge number is 8944. I'm unarmed. I'm holding a basket. Look at my hands." Blaine was shaking. The Glock 17 trembled in his grip. The barrel was pointed squarely at Kaden's chest. "Shut up. Get on the ground. On the ground now." "I can't do that, son," Kaden said. "If I move, you're going to kill me, and you really don't want to do that?" "Don't call me son." Blaine took a step forward, closing the distance to less than feet, a deadly distance. From the periphery, Kaden saw a phone go up. A teenager in a hoodie, ironically similar to Kaden's, was live streaming. Good. Witnesses were insurance. "Dispatch, I have a non-compliant suspect at the supermarket," Blaine yelled into his shoulder radio, never taking his eyes off Kaden. "Possible weapon. Send backup." "There is no weapon," Kaden stated clearly for the camera. "I am a federal agent." "Liar." Blaine was sweating profusely now. The narrative in his head was collapsing, but he couldn't back down. To back down now would be to admit he was wrong. To admit he had pulled a gun on an innocent man because of his own bias. His ego wouldn't allow it. He had to be right. He had to make Kaden the villain. Last warning. Blaine screamed, his finger tightening on the trigger. The automatic sliding doors at the front of the store whooshed open. Oak Creek was a small town, but it had a surprisingly competent police leadership. Chief Mira Novak was a transfer from Detroit, a no-nonsense woman who had spent years cleaning up precincts. She happened to be in the pharmacy section of the supermarket, picking up a prescription for her elderly mother. She heard the commotion. She heard the code 3 come over her own radio on her belt. She recognized the voice. Blaine's. Novak didn't run. She moved with tactical precision. She unholstered her own weapon, but kept it at the low ready, rounding the corner of the cereal aisle just as Blaine was preparing to fire. She saw the scene. She saw the tall black man standing still as a statue, hands open. She saw Blaine, her officer, looking like a cornered rat with a cannon. She didn't look at Kaden's skin. She looked at his demeanor. She saw the discipline. She saw the lack of fear. Cop, she thought instantly, or military. Then she looked at Blaine. She saw the finger on the trigger. Violation of protocol. Officer Blaine! Her voice was a whip crack, sharper and louder than anything Blaine had shouted. Blaine flinched, his eyes darting to the side. Chief, he said, he's got a weapon. He's refusing to comply. Chief Novak stepped into the aisle, placing herself triangularly between them, though staying out of the line of fire. Holster your weapon, Blaine. But, I said, holster your damn weapon, Novak roared. Now! Blaine hesitated. The power struggle in his brain was visible, but the fear of the chief outweighed the fear of the suspect. Slowly, shakily, he lowered the gun. Hands on your head! Blaine tried one last time to command Kaden, desperate to save face. Stand down, Ronan, Novak said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm. She turned to Kaden. She holstered her weapon. Sir, you said you're federal. Kaden exhaled, the first real breath he'd taken. Special Agent Kaden Voss, FBI. Badge is in my back right pocket. Can I reach for it? Novak nodded slowly. Nothing. Kaden reached back, pulled out the leather wallet, and flipped it open. The gold shield of the Federal Bureau of Investigation glinted under the fluorescent lights. Novak looked at the badge, then up at Kaden. She looked at Blaine, whose face had drained of all color. He looked like a ghost. Agent Voss, Novak said, her tone professional but apologetic. I'm Chief Novak. Chief? Kaden nodded. He looked at Blaine. Your officer nearly executed me for buying pasta sauce. Blaine stammered. He fit the description. He was reaching. He was shopping, Blaine, Novak said, her voice like ice. I've been in the pharmacy. I didn't hear a single call about a shoplifter fitting this description. I saw him looking suspicious, Blaine mumbled. Suspicious? Kaden repeated, stepping forward. The dynamic had shifted. The prey was now the predator. Explain that to me, officer. What specifically was suspicious about my behavior? Was it the eggs? The marinara? Blaine couldn't answer. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Give me your badge, Novak said. Blaine's head snapped up. What? Your badge and your gun. Novak held out her hand. Chief, you can't be serious. I was following protocol. You pointed a loaded firearm at a federal agent in a crowded supermarket because you have zero situational awareness and zero trigger discipline. Novak snapped. You are a liability. Give me the badge now. With trembling hands, Blaine unclipped his badge. He unbuckled his gun belt. He handed them over. He felt naked. He felt the eyes of the shoppers, the stock boy, the teenager with the phone. "You are relieved of duty pending an internal investigation," Novak said. "Go to your car, drive home. Do not come to the precinct until you are called." "Chief, please," Blaine whispered, tears of humiliation welling in his eyes. "This is my life." "You should have thought about that before you pulled a gun on a man for existing," Kaden said. Blaine looked at Kaden one last time, not with remorse, but with a burning, hateful glare. He turned and walked away, the sound of his boots dragging on the floor the only noise in the store. But Blaine wasn't done. As he walked out the automatic doors, the humiliation curdled into something darker. He pulled out his personal phone. If he was going down, he was going to control the narrative. He opened Twitter. He opened Facebook. He began to type. The fallout was immediate, but not in the way anyone expected. Within hours, the video shot by the teenager, a kid named Declan, had gone viral. It showed the confrontation, the gun pointed at Kaden, and the arrival of Chief Novak. It was titled, "Racist Cop Pulls Gun on Black FBI Agent," but Ronan Blaine had gotten ahead of it in the darkest corners of the internet. Sitting in his dark apartment, surrounded by empty beer cans, Blaine had logged into a series of anonymous accounts. He posted on local community pages, leaked anonymous tips to right-wing blogs, and spun a story that Kaden had been aggressive, that he had flashed a weapon first, and that the woke police chief had thrown a good cop under the bus to appease the media. "I heard the guy was threatening customers," Blaine typed under the handle Patriot_Defender88. "Officer Blaine is a hero who stopped a potential shooter. The FBI badge was probably fake. He knew it was a lie. But he also knew how the internet worked. Truth didn't matter. Volume did. By morning, the narrative was split. To the mainstream, Kaden was a victim of profiling. But to a vocal, angry minority in Oak Creek, Blaine was a martyr." Kaden sat in the local FBI field office, staring at his computer screen. His boss, Assistant Special Agent in Charge Tariq Hale, a man who hated publicity more than he hated crime, tossed a file on Kaden's desk. "You're trending, Voss," Hale grunted. "I didn't ask to be," Kaden replied, not looking up. "Headquarters is asking questions. They want to know why you were involved in a local incident." "I was buying dinner, Tariq. I wasn't involved until a Glock was shoved in my face." Hale sighed. "I know. But this Blaine character, he's making noise. He's got a lawyer, a guy named Harlan Novak, a real shark. They're claiming wrongful termination. They're saying you provoked him." Kaden laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "Provoked him. I stood there. They're digging, Kaden. They're looking into your past cases, your disciplinary record. They want to paint you as a loose cannon to justify Blaine's fear." Kaden's eyes narrowed. "Let them dig. My record is clean." "Is it?" Hale raised an eyebrow. "What about the incident in Detroit? The excessive force complaint that was cleared? The guy came at me with a knife. Novak won't care. He'll spin it. Listen, the Bureau backs you, but we need this to go away. Do not engage with the media. Do not talk to Blaine. Let the chief handle her house." But Chief Novak was having trouble handling her house. At the Oak Creek precinct, the atmosphere was toxic. Half the squad, the older guys, the ones who played poker with Blaine's dad, were grumbling. They felt Novak had emasculated a fellow officer in public. "She didn't have to strip him right there," Sergeant Thorne whispered by the coffee machine. "Could have handled it in the office. It's a betrayal." Novak heard the whispers. She knew she was sitting on a powder keg. She called Kaden. "Agent Voss," she said, her voice tight. "We have a problem." "What kind of problem, Chief?" "The union is fighting the firing. They're demanding a reinstatement hearing, and worse, Blaine has rallied a group. They're planning a protest outside the precinct. They're calling it Back the Badge. Kaden rubbed his temples. He held a gun to my head, Chief, and now he's having a parade. It's not just a parade, Kaden. I just got a call from a private investigator friend of mine. Blaine has been meeting with some bad people. People from the Iron Guard. You know them? Kaden went cold. The Iron Guard was a white nationalist militia group the FBI had been tracking. They were violent, organized, and looking for a cause. I know them, Kaden said. If Blaine brings them into Oak Creek, Novak said, this isn't just a wrongful termination suit anymore. It's a war. The morning sun over Oak Creek usually brought the promise of a quiet suburban day, but it rose over a battlefield. The sidewalk in front of the Oak Creek Police Precinct had been transformed. Barricades were erected. News vans from CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC were parked in a chaotic jigsaw puzzle along the curb, their satellite dishes pointed skyward like hungry mouths waiting to be fed. At the center of the storm was Ronan Blaine. He stood on the bed of a lifted Ford F-150, a megaphone in one hand and a Back the Blue sign in the other. He wasn't wearing his uniform, but he wore a tactical vest over a tight black t-shirt, sunglasses, and a baseball cap pulled low. Behind him stood 6 men who looked nothing like concerned citizens. They were large, bearded, and heavily armed with AR-15s slung over their chests. Open carry was legal in the state, and they were flaunting it. This was the Iron Guard. They want to take our streets, Blaine bellowed into the megaphone, his voice distorted and tinny. They want to let criminals roam free while they handcuff the men and women who protect you. Chief Novak is a traitor. She sided with a thug over her own officer. The crowd, a mix of genuine police supporters and agitated out-of-towners brought in by the militia, roared in approval. Inside the precinct, Chief Mira Novak watched the spectacle from her second-floor office window. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the blinds. "This is a circus," she muttered. Behind her, Sergeant Thorne, one of the few officers who had remained loyal to her, looked grim. "It's worse, Chief. The union rep, Harlan Novak, just filed an injunction. They're suing the department for wrongful termination and defamation. They're saying you violated Blaine's due process by firing him without a tribunal." He pointed a gun at a Fed, Thorne. Novak spat, turning around. "Due process involves not acting like a cowboy in the frozen food aisle." "I know that," Thorne said quietly. "But Novak is good. He's spinning it. He's saying Blaine had credible intelligence, that Agent Voss matched the description of a courier for the East Side Kings gang." Novak froze. It was a lie. A bold, disgusting lie. But in the court of public opinion, a lie traveled halfway around the world while the truth was still putting on its shoes. By claiming it was an active investigation, Blaine was trying to hide behind qualified immunity. "Get Agent Voss on the line," Novak ordered. Miles away, Kaden Voss was living in a prison of his own making. His house, a modest 2-story colonial at the end of a cul-de-sac, was surrounded, not by police, but by the media. Reporters were camped on his lawn. Photographers were using telephoto lenses to try and get a shot through his kitchen window. Inside, the blinds were drawn. The air was stale. Alara, his fiancée, sat at the kitchen table, her hands shaking as she held a cup of tea. She was a school teacher, a woman of infinite patience, but the hours had broken her. "Kaden, look at this," she whispered, sliding her iPad across the table. Kaden looked. It was a darker corner of the internet, a forum dedicated to the Iron Guard. A thread titled "Target Identified" had his home address, his license plate number, and photos of Alara leaving her school. "We know where he lives," one comment read. "Time to pay a visit." Kaden felt a cold rage settle in his gut. It was one thing to come after him. He was trained for this. He had hunted cartels in Mexico and traffickers in Eastern Europe, but Alara was innocent. "Pack a bag," Kaden said, his voice low and dangerous. "What?" "Pack a bag, Alara. You're going to your sister's in Maryland now." "I'm not leaving you," she protested, tears spilling over. "This isn't a debate." Kaden snapped, the stress causing him to raise his voice for the first time in their relationship. He immediately softened, kneeling beside her chair. "Baby, please. These aren't just angry neighbors. The Iron Guard is involved. They are domestic terrorists. I can't focus on fighting them if I'm worried about protecting you." Before she could answer, a loud crash shattered the silence. Glass exploded into the living room. A brick had been hurled through the front bay window. Kaden moved on instinct. He tackled Alara, covering her body with his own as shards of glass rained down on the hardwood floor. "Stay down!" he hissed. He crawled toward the hallway, reaching for his service weapon, a Sig Sauer P229, which he had placed on the mantel. He peered around the corner. Through the jagged hole in the window, he saw a dark sedan screeching away, tires smoking. On the floor, wrapped around the brick, was a note. Kaden stood up, glass crunching under his boots, and picked it up. "Leave town or die." His phone buzzed. It was Chief Novak. "Voss," he answered, his voice trembling with suppressed violence. "Damien, turn on the news," Novak said. "Blaine just doubled down. And Damien, the FBI isn't backing you." "What?" "I just got off the phone with your ASAC, Hale. The Bureau is terrified of the optics. They don't want a war with the police union. They're placing you on administrative leave pending the investigation. They're hanging you out to dry, Damien." Kaden looked at the shattered window. He looked at Alara, sobbing in the corner. He looked at the note in his hand. The system he had served was abandoning him. The laws he enforced were being twisted to protect a man who wanted him dead. "Fine," Kaden said, his voice turning into a growl. "If the Bureau won't handle it, I will." "Damien, don't do anything stupid," Novak warned. "If you retaliate, you give them exactly what they want. You become the angry black man they're painting you to be." "I'm not going to retaliate, Chief," Kaden said, checking the magazine of his pistol. "I'm going to investigate. Blaine isn't just a racist. He's too confident. He's too organized. A beat cop doesn't get a militia guard and a high-priced lawyer overnight. Someone is funding him." "You think he's dirty?" "I think he's the filthiest cop in your precinct," Kaden said, "and I'm going to prove it. But I need your help. I need access to the evidence room logs." Novak hesitated. Giving a suspended federal agent access to internal police files was career suicide. It was illegal. It could send her to prison. She thought about Blaine pointing that gun. She thought about the back the blue chants that were really just chants for back the white. "Meet me at the old impound lot on 9th Street, Novak said. "Bring a burner phone." The Oak Creek impound lot was a graveyard of rusted metal and shattered dreams. Under the cover of a moonless night, it was the perfect place for a conspiracy. Kaden arrived in a rental car, a nondescript Toyota Camry he had picked up 2 towns over. Alara was safe in Maryland. Now he was alone. Chief Novak was waiting by a crushed Honda Civic. She wore a dark trench coat and looked tired. She handed Kaden a thick manila envelope. "This is it," she whispered, her breath visible in the chilly night air. "Digital copies of Blaine's arrest records, plus the logs from the evidence locker." "You didn't swipe your badge to print these, did you?" Kaden asked, flipping through the pages. I'm not an amateur, Voss. I use Thorne's login. He knows. He's with us. Kaden scanned the documents under the dim light of a distant street lamp. His eyes, trained to spot patterns in complex RICO cases, began to dart across the pages. Look at the drug busts, Kaden said, pointing to a column of data. Blaine has the highest number of narcotics arrests in the department. I know, Novak said. That's why he was untouchable for so long. He brings in numbers. But look at the seizures, Kaden countered. Arrests a dealer named Spike, charges him with possession with intent to distribute. The report says he seized 50 grams of cocaine. Standard. No. Kaden shook his head. Spike is a mid-level distributor. I know his crew. They don't move 50 grams, they move kilos. If Blaine busted Spike, there should have been at least a brick. Maybe two. Novak frowned. Maybe Spike tossed it. Look at the next one. Kaden flipped the page. Busts a meth lab in the trailer park. Seizes $5,000 in cash. Meth labs of that size usually have 50 to 60 grand on site. Operating cash. Kaden looked up, his eyes locking with hers. He's skimming. He's busting the dealers, taking the majority of the product and the cash, booking a small amount to make the arrest stick and keeping the rest. That's a hell of a theory, Voss. But where is he putting it? Blaine lives in a crappy apartment. He drives an old truck. He's not keeping it, Kaden realized. He's moving it. That's why the Iron Guard is here. They aren't here for ideological support. They're his partners. It all clicked. The militia needed funding for their weapons and training camps. Blaine provided the drugs and cash he stole from rival gangs. In exchange, the militia provided him with protection and muscle. The Back the Badge rally was a smokescreen. It was a diversion to keep everyone looking at the racial tension while they moved a massive shipment. We need proof, Novak said. Hard proof. If we accuse him of this without a smoking gun, they'll burn the city down. The warehouse, Kaden said. In his report from the supermarket incident, he mentioned he was patrolling near the industrial district before he came to the store. Why was he there? That's outside his sector. Novak checked the map on her phone. The old textile mill on River Road. It's abandoned. Perfect place for a stash house. Kaden said. I can't authorize a raid, Novak said. I don't have probable cause. A judge won't sign a warrant based on a hunch from a suspended agent and a disgraced chief. Then we don't raid it, Kaden said, checking his weapon again. I go in, recon only. I get photos, I get video. Then we bring it to the DOJ. It's suicide, Novak argued. If the Iron Guard is in there, they'll kill you. They're already trying to kill me, Chief. At least this way I get to shoot back. The textile mill loomed like a rotting tooth against the skyline. It was a massive brick structure, windows broken, surrounded by a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. Kaden parked the rental a mile away and moved in on foot. He wore black tactical gear he had kept in his trunk, unmarked, no FBI patches. Tonight, he wasn't an agent. He was a ghost. He breached the perimeter through a hole in the fence he found near the drainage ditch. The grounds were silent, but fresh tire tracks in the mud told a different story. Heavy trucks had been here recently. He crept toward the main loading dock. The metal door was slightly ajar. Faint light spilled out. Kaden moved with the silence of a predator. He slipped through the gap and found himself on a catwalk overlooking the main factory floor. What he saw stopped his heart. Below him, under the harsh glare of portable floodlights, was a full-scale operation. But it wasn't just drugs. Wooden crates were stacked high. Men in fatigue pants, members of the Iron Guard, were prying them open. Inside the crates were not kilos of cocaine, but weapons, military-grade hardware, automatic rifles, suppressors, even crates marked with explosive hazard symbols. And there, in the center of it all, was Ronan Blaine. Blaine looked different. He wasn't the scared cop from the supermarket anymore. He was laughing, holding a beer, slapping the back of a massive man with a thick red beard. "I told you, Harlan," Blaine said, his voice carrying up to the catwalk. "The diversion worked perfectly. Everyone is watching the precinct. Nobody is looking at the mill." The bearded man, Harlan Vane, the leader of the Iron Guard, nodded. "You did good, Pig. The shipment heads out to the camps at dawn. Once we have these distributed, we start the real noise." "And my cut?" Blaine asked. "Don't worry about your cut," Vane sneered. "You'll get paid when the job is done." Kaden pulled out his burner phone. He needed to record this. He raised the phone, aiming the camera through the railing. Click. It was the faintest sound. A loose bolt on the catwalk shifted under his weight. Harlan Vane's head snapped up. He had the instincts of a soldier. He looked straight up into the darkness. "Up top," Harlan roared. Before Kaden could react, bullets sparked against the metal railing. Ping, ping, ping. "Contact! Intruder!" Kaden scrambled back, dropping to a prone position as the air around him filled with lead. He had been made. "Don't let him leave!" Blaine screamed, his voice filled with panic. "Kill him!" Kaden crawled backwards, his heart hammering against his ribs. He couldn't fight an army. He had to run. He scrambled toward the exit, but the door he came in was now blocked by 2 militia members sprinting up the stairs. He was trapped. He looked around desperately. To his right, a rusted ventilation shaft. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot. Kaden kicked the grate open and dove in head first just as a burst of gunfire shredded the wall where he had been standing. He slid down the metal chute, tumbling into darkness, landing hard on a pile of coal dust in the basement. He groaned, checking his limbs. Nothing broken, but he could hear boots thundering above him. They were sweeping the building. He pulled out his phone. No signal in the basement. He was cut off. Alone. Outnumbered 20-1. And the man hunting him was the man who had started it all in the pasta aisle. "Come out, Agent Voss." Blaine's voice echoed down the elevator shaft. "I know it's you. There's no FBI coming to save you this time. It's just you and me." Kaden checked his weapon. Rounds left. He took a deep breath. "Come and get me," he whispered. Meanwhile, at the precinct, Chief Novak was pacing. Kaden hadn't checked in. Her office door burst open. It was Harlan Novak, Blaine's lawyer, looking smug. "Chief Novak," Novak said, smoothing his expensive suit. "I have a judge's order here. You are to reinstate Officer Blaine immediately with back pay, and you are to issue a public apology." Novak looked at the paper. It was signed by Judge Blaine, a man known for his golf trips with the police union president. "Get out of my office, Novak." "I don't think you understand." Novak smiled. "You lost. The town is with us. The law is with us. Blaine is a hero." Novak looked at the clock. If Kaden was right, Blaine was no hero. He was a domestic terrorist, but if Kaden was dead, none of it mattered. She made a decision. It was the kind of decision that ended careers but saved souls. She grabbed her radio. "All units, this is Chief Novak." She broadcasted on the main channel, her voice steady. "I am declaring a citywide emergency. All available units are to converge on the old textile mill on River Road immediately. Suspects are heavily armed. Rules of engagement are active." "Chief," Sergeant Thorne ran in, "you can't do that. You don't have a warrant. If you're wrong, the city will sue us into oblivion." Novak holstered her weapon and grabbed a shotgun from the rack. "If I'm wrong, I'll go to jail." she said, racking the slide. But if I'm right, I'm saving a federal agent. Who's with me? Thorne looked at her. He looked at the other officers gathering in the hallway. They were tired of the circus. They were tired of the militia in their town. They wanted to be cops again. Let's roll, Thorne said. The basement of the old textile mill was a labyrinth of shadows, smelling of damp earth and century-old coal dust. Kaden Voss crouched behind a rusted boiler, his breathing shallow and controlled. Above him, the heavy thud of combat boots echoed through the floorboards like the drums of war. "Find him!" Blaine screamed from the catwalk above. "Burn him out if you have to. No one leaves this building alive." Kaden heard the distinct click of a safety being disengaged. A militia member wearing night vision goggles was creeping down the rusted metal stairs. Kaden didn't panic. He waited. He picked up a loose bolt from the floor and tossed it into the far corner of the room. Clang. The militiaman spun around, raising his rifle toward the sound. In that split second of distraction, Kaden moved. He surged forward, staying low, and tackled the man at the knees. The rifle clattered to the concrete. Kaden delivered a precise, tactical strike to the man's jaw, knocking him unconscious instantly. He grabbed the militia member's AR-15 and his radio. "Harlan," a voice crackled over the radio. "Perimeter breach. We have lights on the road. Looks like cops. Lots of them. Oak Creek PD." Harlan's voice came back, calm and deadly. "Ignore them. They won't engage. The chief has no jurisdiction here." "Negative," the sentry shouted. "They're ramming the gate." Crash. The sound of the chain-link fence being torn down by a reinforced police cruiser reverberated through the mill. Outside, the night exploded into chaos. Sirens wailed, cutting through the silence. Red and blue lights painted the rotting brick walls of the factory in a strobe of urgency. Chief Mira Novak stepped out of her cruiser, her shotgun leveled. Behind her, 6 patrol cars fanned out, officers taking cover behind doors and pillars. "This is the Oak Creek Police Department." Novak's voice was amplified by a loudspeaker. "Throw down your weapons and come out with your hands up. You are surrounded." From the upper windows of the mill, a muzzle flashed. Crack, crack, crack. Bullets chewed up the asphalt near Novak's feet. She didn't flinch. "Engage," she ordered. "Cover fire. Move up." The firefight began in earnest. The loyal officers of Oak Creek, tired of being humiliated by Blaine's militia friends, fought with a ferocity that surprised the Iron Guard. They returned fire, pinning the militia members away from the windows. Inside, Blaine was unraveling. The plan was falling apart. The hero cop narrative was dissolving into a felony shootout. "We have to go," Harlan yelled, grabbing a duffel bag full of cash. "The back exit. We take the tunnel to the river." "What about Voss?" Blaine shrieked, his eyes wild. "Forget him. He's dead already." "No!" Blaine grabbed Harlan by the vest. "If he lives, I burn. He has seen everything. I need to kill him." Harlan shoved Blaine away. "You're on your own, you lunatic." Harlan and 3 of his men ran for the loading bay. Blaine stood there, paralyzed by indecision. Then rage took over. He wasn't going to run. He was going to finish what he started in the supermarket. He racked the slide of his own unauthorized assault rifle and headed for the basement stairs. Down in the dark, Kaden heard the footsteps. He heard the screaming. "Voss, I know you're down there," Blaine shouted, firing blindly into the darkness. Sparks flew as bullets ricocheted off the iron pillars. Kaden moved silently through the gloom. He didn't fire back. He was hunting. Blaine reached the bottom of the stairs, sweeping his flashlight frantically. The beam cut through the dust, illuminating the old machinery. "Come out and die like a man." "You first, Ronan," a voice whispered from directly behind him. Blaine spun around, raising his rifle, but he was too slow. Kaden didn't shoot him. That would have been too easy. Instead, he swung the stock of the captured AR-15, smashing it into Blaine's hands. The rifle flew into the darkness. Blaine screamed, clutching his fractured fingers. He stumbled back, reaching for his sidearm, the same Glock he had pulled in the supermarket. Kaden stepped into the light. He was covered in coal dust, his tactical gear torn, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. He looked like an avenging angel. "Don't do it, Ronan," Kaden said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Don't make me kill you." "You ruined my life," Blaine sobbed, fumbling with the holster. "I was a hero." "They love to lie," Kaden said, "and now the lie is over." Blaine ripped the gun free. He raised it. Bang! The shot was deafening in the enclosed space. Blaine gasped. He dropped the gun. He looked down at his right shoulder. A neat red hole had appeared in the fabric of his tactical vest. Kaden stood with his pistol raised, smoke curling from the barrel. He had shot to disarm, not to kill. "I told you," Kaden said, holstering his weapon and pulling out a pair of heavy zip ties. "I'm a federal agent. We don't miss." Blaine fell to his knees, clutching his shoulder, wailing in pain and self-pity. Kaden walked over, kicked the Glock away, and spun Blaine around. He cinched the zip ties tight, tighter than necessary. "Ronan Blaine," Kaden said, leaning close to his ear. "You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you start using it." Upstairs, the shooting had stopped. The Iron Guard had surrendered as soon as Harlan was caught trying to swim across the river by a K-9 unit. Kaden marched Blaine up the stairs, shoving him out into the blinding glare of the police floodlights. Silence fell over the scene. The officers lowered their weapons. Chief Mira Novak stepped forward, her face grim but satisfied. She looked at Blaine, bleeding and weeping in zip ties. She looked at Kaden, battered but standing tall. "You got him," she said softly. "We got him," Kaden corrected. As the paramedics rushed in to treat Blaine, a news helicopter from Channel 4 hovered overhead, its spotlight capturing the scene. The image was broadcast live to thousands of homes. The hero cop exposed as a criminal, being led away in cuffs by the very man he had tried to victimize. But the karma was only just beginning. The trial of Ronan Blaine was dubbed the trial of the decade by the state media. But for Blaine, it was a slow, agonizing suffocation. The Back the Badge movement evaporated overnight. As soon as the body cam footage from the raid was released, along with the photos Kaden had taken of the weapons cache, the public support curdled into outrage. The same neighbors who had marched for Blaine now spat on the sidewalk when his lawyer walked by. Blaine sat at the defense table, looking smaller than he ever had. His expensive suit hung loosely on his frame. He had lost weight in protective custody. He had to be in protective custody because the Aryan Brotherhood gangs inside the jail, whom he had previously arrested and skimmed drugs from, had put a green light on his head. He was safe nowhere. The prosecutor wasn't a local DA. It was a fierce assistant U.S. attorney from Chicago, brought in specifically because the federal government wanted to make an example of the corruption. "Mr. Blaine," the prosecutor said during cross-examination, pacing in front of the jury, "you claimed you feared for your life in the supermarket." He was aggressive," Blaine stammered, his voice weak. "We have the video, Mr. Blaine," the prosecutor said, pointing to the screen. "We see a man holding eggs. We see a man identifying himself. We see you shaking. We see you escalating. And then we found kilos of cocaine and illegal assault rifles in a warehouse you were guarding. Was Agent Voss a threat to your life, or was he a threat to your criminal enterprise?" Blaine looked at the jury. He saw no sympathy. He saw disgust. He saw 12 people who realized that the man sworn to protect them was actually the wolf. The verdict took less than hours. Guilty on all counts: civil rights violations, conspiracy to distribute narcotics, possession of unregistered firearms, attempted murder of a federal officer. When the judge read the sentence, the courtroom was so quiet you could hear the air conditioning hum. Ronan Blaine, you have disgraced your uniform and betrayed your oath. You are sentenced to years in a federal maximum security penitentiary without the possibility of parole. Blaine didn't scream. He didn't fight. He just slumped forward, his head hitting the table, and wept. But the twist of the knife came later. Kaden was packing up his desk at the Oak Creek field office. He had been offered a promotion, assistant director of the Civil Rights Division in Washington, D.C. He was taking it. His phone rang. It was Chief Novak. "You need to see this," she said. "Turn on the local news." Kaden turned on the TV in the break room. The reporter stood outside the county jail. In a shocking turn of events, former Officer Ronan Blaine has been denied transfer to the safe wing of the federal prison system. Due to overcrowding and protective custody, he has been assigned to the general population at USP Pollock. Kaden's eyes widened. USP Pollock was notorious. It was where the leaders of the East Side Kings, the very gang Blaine had been framing and robbing, were housed. "Karma," Kaden whispered. "It doesn't miss either." The supermarket on 4th Street had been renovated. The aisle where it all happened was now the bakery section, smelling of fresh bread and cinnamon. Kaden stood there holding a basket. He wasn't wearing a hoodie this time. He was wearing a suit. He was just passing through town to sell his house before the move to D.C. He felt a presence behind him. He turned. It was a young police officer, fresh out of the academy. His uniform was crisp. His face was open and friendly. "Excuse me, sir," the young officer said. Kaden tensed slightly, old instincts flaring. "Can I help you, officer?" "I just wanted to say—" The young man hesitated, then extended his hand. "Thank you. I was in the academy when the Blaine story broke. They use your video in training now, Chapter 1, on de-escalation and bias. You changed the way we learn. You made us better." Kaden looked at the young man's hand. He looked at the badge. It was shiny, untarnished. He shook the hand. "Just do the job right, son. That's all we ask." "I will, sir." Kaden walked out of the store, the automatic doors sliding open into the warm afternoon sun. He took a deep breath. The air tasted sweet. He got into his car where Laura was waiting. She was pregnant, her hand resting on her belly. She smiled as he got in. "Get the pasta sauce?" she asked. "Yeah." Kaden smiled, tossing the jar in the back and the eggs. "No drama this time." "Good," she kissed his cheek. "Let's go home." Kaden put the car in drive and pulled away. As he drove past the precinct, he saw Chief Novak standing on the steps, briefing a new class of recruits. The department was healing. The rot had been cut out. In a cold concrete cell 1,000 miles away, Ronan Blaine sat alone, staring at a wall, haunted by the memory of the man in the hoodie who refused to bow. He had tried to break Kaden Voss. Instead, he had broken himself against a force he never understood, the unbreakable dignity of the truth. Justice had been served, cold, hard, and absolute. This story isn't just a drama. It's a reflection of the battles fought every day between prejudice and integrity. Kaden Voss didn't just survive. He dismantled a corrupt system by refusing to be the victim they wanted him to be. The karma that hit Ronan Blaine wasn't magic. It was the inevitable consequence of arrogance meeting accountability, If you enjoyed this roller coaster of justice, twist endings, and heavy karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss a story. Share this video with someone who needs to see the good guys win. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next.